Welcome to StabtheDragon Productions for Whiskey Review number 3. We will be looking at Blackland Bourbon Whiskey. This will be a Fort Worth product from Blackland Distilleries. Now, Blackland Distillery is named for a geographic zone called the Blackland Prairie that runs from roughly the Red River down south through the Dallas-Fort Worth area to San Antonio. I love the fact that a distillery and whiskey are named for a geographical area with its own distinct ecosystem and history. Blackland is similar to Balcones in this respect. Balcones from neighboring Waco is named after an underground fault that runs through that part of Texas. Blackland is located just west of downtown Fort Worth in the Founders District, and it started in 2019 by Fort Worth native Marcus Kyprios. He's a local attorney. He graduated from the Culinary School of Fort Worth. Distiller Ezra Cox, with over 20 years of experience, was assisting in the brewing and distilling. There are a couple of unique things about Blackland Distillery. It uses a high-tech computerized system for distilling of spirits, and it uses an odd-sounding hybrid grain, triticale, in its mash bill. Triticale is a hybrid grain between wheat and rice. It gives the productivity of wheat but the toughness and durability of rye. Developed in the late 1900s, or late 1800s, the 19th century, in Scotland, it's made rapid strides in recent decades with its viability and usefulness. It's grown primarily in Europe, but now increasingly here in America. And the triticale that is used by Blackland Distillery is grown here in North Texas. Triticale has more protein than either wheat or rye. This is a new distilling company with bold plans for the future. Fort Worth has been my home for over 35 years, and I am looking forward to seeing this brand grow. So under the history category of the StabtheDragon Whiskey Review, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 points. As a new whiskey, it doesn't have a whole lot of history, but because it's Fort Worth and it's the way it's being started and handled, I'm going to give it a 4. Under marketing and packaging, I've not seen any advertisements or commercials for this whiskey, but that's not unusual. I very rarely see commercials, a few billboards for some whiskey brands here and there, but nothing for Blackland. So the bottle and label is where I'm going to be focused. This bottle is a very nice decanter style. It's very attractive, clear glass, fluted all up and down here. It's got the side benefit with the flutes of actually assisting in how you grip the bottle for pouring and handling. Now the cork is a rubber cork right there. So it's not a real cork. It's rubber. Some people really don't like that. Real corks are great, but they can dry out and break in your bottle. I don't think a rubber cork's going to do that. The simple white label here on the front, it looks simple. What you cannot see on this video, if you get up close to it, it's actually pretty cool because it's embossed with a circular pattern that says Blackland Fort Worth. The embossing is, you can feel it here there in the label, and it's got a sheaf of grain in the middle, and I'm assuming that's triticale. It may just be a generic crane looking thing, but I'm sure it represents the triticale. And then also in tiny golden script, and I have to use a magnifying glass to read it, is some information about the bourbon. It says handcrafted in the Blackland Prairie. The Blackland Prairie runs from the Red River to the north down to San Antonio in the south. Lightning fires cleared the land for native tall grass to thrive in the rich, dark soil. So all of that is tiny gold script on the label. Now the big bold Blackland Bourbon whiskey, of course, that stands out, and that's pretty plain and simple. But you do have to dig a little bit, use a magnifying glass to see that gold script. In tiny print at the bottom is Fort Worth, 41.5% alcohol by volume, 750 milliliters. Keep in mind this is a 2-year-old company just getting started, so a big expensive label is not called for at this point. But this small label really is pretty nice when you get down to the details. The black label on the back has got all the legal stuff and a barcode. So it covers all the legal territory there for the lawyers. It also says we use innovative distillation methods to produce remastered spirits for the modern drinker whose palate appreciates tradition but longs for tomorrow's taste. Blended and bottled by Blackland Distillery, 70% aged 2 years. Now most whiskeys do include nice sounding gobbledygook that is on their labels to make their product sound awesome. And most of the time that's just marketing strategy, make you feel good about what you're drinking. Here though, there are a couple of things that caught my eye. The talk about the Blackland Prairie explains their name, which I like. And on the back, that piece about innovative distillation methods does describe Blackland's use of high-tech stills. Remastered spirits, that's an oblique way of saying that this is an 80% sourced whiskey from a distillery in Minnesota and blended here in Fort Worth. That's what that means. For the modern drinker, I think describes both the distillation method. It describes the bar that I've not yet been to, but everything I've heard about and read about is that the bar there at the distillery is fantastic. So I've not been there. I do hope to go there at some point, and it does appeal to the younger crowd, I've heard. The whiskey is also based on triticale, and so that's, again, kind of a futuristic grain, I think, that's going to be increasing in popularity due to the nutritional value of it. This problem with the label, though, 70% aged 2 years, is a bit confusing because I've read and watched that says, watched videos, read information that says 80% of the whiskey is from Minnesota. So where does that 70% aged 2 years come from? I'm not sure. I don't know really what that means. And so a little bit of lack of clarity on that label. So on the label, on the advertising and how it's marketed, I give it a maximum of 5 points. So I'm going to say 3 points out of 5 for the marketing and label. And I really do think there should be some type of local advertising for this brand, but advertising is expensive, and with your young distillery, you may not be able to go into the full advertising mode. But I do wish that it was more clear on the label. And another thing about the bottle versus the name. This is a very nice decanter style bottle that is kind of modern. It doesn't harken back to the old days, really, in my mind anyway. And yet with a name like Blackland, where you're naming your brand after an ecosystem that goes back to the ancient Indians, and in your explanation for it, you do point back to the Indians, I would think that somewhere on the label or the bottle there needs to be something that links the name in the bottle with Blackland. And so I see a little bit of a disconnect just with the art form of the bottle and the label. So maybe in the future something like that will be corrected. Let's move on to something more important, and that's the composition of this whiskey. Here you got a maximum points of 15. Now finding the composition of this whiskey was an adventure. The website says one thing, several reviews and news articles and videos say different things. So here's what I think the composition is. The bourbon has 80% sourced whiskey from Minnesota. And that whiskey is a mixture of corn, rye, and wheat as the mash bill. No barley is included from what I understand. Although again, depends on what sources you trust. Blackland blends it with 20% of their proprietary Triticale whiskey that's young, but is the direction they want to take this bourbon eventually. And so I'm thinking that 20% is 100% Triticale, but I'm not sure. And I keep saying Triticale. I even had to research how do you pronounce that word, and there's apparently a wide variety of ways to pronounce it. The best online source that I found says Triticale, but people will say Triticale, which is how I've said it for years, or Triticale. I've heard that. But Triticale is how I've actually heard Mr. Kyprios from the distillery say it. And that's when I researched it, that's what I found also. So the bourbon is all, fairly young. You've got the Minnesota bourbon, you've got the 20% Triticale from Fort Worth. But more research is needed here on my part. But again, the sources are quite confusing. And age, I know on the bottle it says 70% is 2-year-old, but that doesn't really make any sense either if 80% of it is from Minnesota. So who knows? I can't figure that part out, and that's part of the lack of clarity on the bottle. But here's the thing I'm excited about as far as the composition goes, and that's the Triticale. This is Texas grown. It's a futuristic grain, even though its roots go back to the late 1800s. But this is the only whiskey I'm aware of that uses Triticale, and for whatever reason, that fascinates me. And so that alone makes me root for this brand. So out of 15 possible points on composition, I'm going to give it a 10, which is not as much as I want to give this whiskey, but the confusion over the mash bill and the age, the conflicts between the websites, the reviews, and the bottle, those take away points. Physical appearance. Here we've got a possible 5 points. I'm going to say it's a fairly light to medium colored bourbon, reflecting its youthfulness. The legs in the glass are light to medium, so I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 points there. Aroma, nosing, 10 points possible here. My nose is close to useless in the whiskey smelling business. I'm just telling you. Broke my nose 3 times one junior year in high school. I've had so many sinus infections. I've not even have COVID, so that doesn't affect me at all. But I do detect a light, pleasant aroma, vaguely floral. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say 8 out of 10 points. Now tasting. Here I've got a maximum of 25 points. When I taste this bourbon, it's a light, sweet bourbon up front, not heavy at all, but not thin. I'm not going to describe it as thin. It's not an overbearing, strong, bold flavor. The taste is similar to the nose in that it's a bit floral and mild and sweet. I do not detect any Texas funk, which is odd if it spent a lot of time in the barrel here in Texas. I know they did age it for a while here in Texas. There's this unique, gentle taste that is hard to identify, and I'm thinking that's the Triticale, because it really doesn't taste like any other whiskey that I've had. And this is what really excites me about this bourbon and gives me hope for the future of the brand. If that flavor comes from only 20% of the whiskey, I can't wait till they've got the full Triticale deal. Now for the bad news. This whiskey does taste like it's a young whiskey. And so you get an ethanol flavor there at the end of the whiskey that's pretty strong with this one. Over the past year and a half, I've consumed 1.5 bottles of this bourbon, and I have figured out how to drink it for enjoyment. Different whiskeys, I have to do different things in my mouth with my tongue and how I swallow, how long I keep the whiskey in to enjoy that particular kind of whiskey. And so once I figured this particular whiskey out, I enjoyed it much more. The ethanol was not as bothersome. And I generally like a strong whiskey. And so I don't mind a really strong burn going on. This is just 41.5 alcohol by volume, so it's a 83 proof. So it's pretty low down in the proof range, but it does punch above its weight there as far as the ethanol burn goes. So I'm going to score this an 18 out of possible 25 points. The mouthfeel, possible points of 15. This is a light, airy whiskey. It's not oily, but neither is it thin. The burn is again stronger than its 83 proof would indicate. I think that's a product of it being young. And again, I don't mind a good burn, but this one can be unpleasant until you figure out exactly how to drink it and when to swallow it just right. So I'm going to give it a 10 out of 15 points. Price, value, and availability, maximum points of 10. At Total Wine on September 27th of 2021, this bourbon is listed for $26.99. At Goody Goody, it's $32.99, and at Specs, it's $29.67. And that's, I think, when I first bought it a year and a half ago or so, maybe 2 years ago. I think I paid about $30 for it. So, this is right in the ballpark. This is a craft distillery, and it's just a couple of years old. So they do have to charge more than the big Kentucky distilleries for their whiskeys. I can get some good Ezra Brooks or Evan Williams for half the price of Blackland, but guess what? Those aren't made in Fort Worth. Those aren't made with triticale. Those aren't new and innovative. Those are old standbys, and so that's understandable. So this is what age, economy of scale, and all the advantages of being well established will do for you. But for a startup craft whiskey, this is a fair price, and I'm glad to buy this local product. Got my cuckoo clock going there. I'm on my second bottle of this in a year and a half, and so I believe in this product. The bourbon is available. I've seen it at all the liquor stores I go to here in Fort Worth and the surrounding area. So I don't know how far away you can get it. Yeah, I've heard it's been released in Oklahoma recently or next month. So maybe Oklahoma you can get it. I'm assuming that throughout Texas at the big stores you can get it. So I'm going to score this 8 out of 10 points for availability, price, and value. Next category I've got is this a neat drink or a mixer? And here I am pretty close to being a neat only drinker. I just don't do mixed drinks, too many extra calories and sugar for me. This is an 83 proof whiskey, so it should be easy drinking, but as I said earlier, the ethanol is strong with this one. I can see this working in a cocktail maybe, and I have heard that at the Blackland Distillery, at the bar they've got there, that they make fantastic cocktails. I've heard nothing but positive about that. So I absolutely need to go there and try this out. I would not do this on the rocks, and I don't like putting ice in whiskey anyway. Boy, I've even had high proof stuff, 117 iron root, and put it on ice, and it just ruined it for me. So I just don't like ice in my drinks. So I'll drink this straight. But you may prefer it in a cocktail. You may prefer it with ice. So out of the 5 points possible, I'm going to give it a 3. Bonus points. The final category is I've got 5 points available as a bonus. I award bonus points. It's all subjective, but I'm going to give Blackland Bourbon the full 5 bonus points because this distillery is in my city. It really is new. It's just a couple of years old, and they are daring to use innovative distilling techniques, daring to use an exotic grain, triticale, to make this whiskey. So, and even their sourced whiskey coming from Minnesota. What the heck? I didn't even know there was distilleries in Minnesota. So, there's a lot of things they're doing here. I really like the idea of Mr. Kyprios, the owner of this distillery. He's a lawyer, but he went to sommelier school and then he went to a culinary art school. I really like that. And so I look at him personally, I look at what they're trying to do here and saying, man, I think this is a good product for right now, it's decent, and in the future, I think it's going to get tremendously better. So 5 bonus points at the end. My total points for this whiskey is 72, and that might seem pretty low. This is only my 3rd whiskey review online. I tend toward being a tough grader and rater in my past. When I was in the Army, I was known for being a tough rater. When I was a school teacher, I was known as being a tough grader. So that just tends to be who I am, I guess. Perhaps I'll mellow out as I get more experience. But because I recognize that I am a tough grader, I have 2 other ways of rating a whiskey. So on the point total, this is a 72. On a letter grade, I'm going to give it a C+. And level of recommend. Here's perhaps the most important way to rate this whiskey. If you like bourbons and live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, this is a must-buy. If you need to taste what Triticale is going to do to a whiskey, here's your chance. Triticale is very different, and I think it's worth experimenting with, so support this local product. If you like bourbons and live in Texas, you should buy this bourbon and give it a fair shake. Now, outside of Texas, as this becomes available, or if you can get it shipped to you, or a friend, or if you're visiting Texas, take it back with you. If you're adventurous and want to experience a young cutting-edge distillery and see what Triticale does in a bottle, then this whiskey's for you. If you love craft distilleries that are springing up all over the country and you want to support the industry, try Blackland Bourbon. Support this bold, young company. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll try again on Stab the Dragon next time.